I'm Rachel Bade.
I'm Eugene Daniels. I'm Ryan Lizza.
I'm Tara Palmieri.
Good morning. I'm Eugene Daniels, a Playbook co-author and White House correspondent. I'm joined by my fellow Playbook co-author, Rachel Bade. President Joe Biden has a robust agenda, and to accomplish it, he will need to navigate relationships within his own Democratic Party, including the progressive wing. We're hosting back-to-back interviews today with Washington State Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and newly elected Congressman Mandera Jones of New York. We're going to discuss how progressives are looking to share power and share power in Washington and work, and maybe fight a little bit with the Biden administration.
I'm Rachel Bade, and I'm going to open up our conversation with Congresswoman Jayapal this morning, and Eugene will rejoin later with Congressman Mandera Jones. Having covered Congresswoman Jayapal for years, I can say that while there's a host of sort of popular and well-known progressives out there, our next guest is the woman who's actually in the room negotiating with Speaker Pelosi on behalf of progressives. So I'm very excited that she's here today. Thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us. Also, for those on the live stream, you can follow our conversation on Twitter using hashtag Politico Playbook, and you can ask us questions by tweeting us at Politico Live. Congresswoman Jayapal, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, so there was a lot of talk on the campaign trail and immediately after the election about progressives pushing President Biden, a moderate naturally, to the left. It's been about a week and a half. How would you say he's doing so far in terms of those progressive priorities that you guys wanted to see?
Well, I think he's doing really, really well, Rachel. Don't forget that we engaged with the Biden campaign well before he became president, and we helped to make his agenda the most progressive platform yet that we've seen in a long time. And so what he's done in this first week is start to deliver on some of those things with the executive orders that he has been putting out, very bold executive orders on immigration, on climate, on racial justice, so many different pieces that are part and parcel of the progressive agenda, including a call for a bold COVID relief package and a call for a $15 minimum wage. So I think that we feel very good about where he started. And I'll say this about President Biden. I think he's gone a far way from when he started his campaign to where he is as president. I do think he understands the crises and the fact that this is a history-making time and a legacy-making time for him and, frankly, for our country.
Are there areas right off the bat where you think President Biden could go further, whether it's on certain executive orders that he's, halfway executed or legislation that you think could go bolder?
There absolutely will be. I mean, it's a little early to tell since he's only been there for a week, but I'll give you two examples of things that we are pushing on. We're thrilled that he said that we were going to executive order signed that we were going to eliminate the use of private prisons in the criminal justice system. We are sending a letter. I think it'll go out today. I'm sending a letter with Jimmy Gomez and Jason Crow to say that needs to extend to immigration detention facilities run by private contractors. There should not be profit making in these private detention facilities for immigration either. That's one example. A second is around student debt cancellation. He hasn't done anything on student debt cancellation yet, but we have spoken to his team, and we do know that he is talking to lawyers and also to Senator Warren and Senator Schumer and us, and trying to make the determination of whether he believes he has the executive power to cancel student loan debt. We believe he does. So that's something we're going to continue to push on. And then a third example is on the COVID relief package. 1.9 trillion is an excellent start. It should be the floor. If anything, we should strengthen it, not weaken it. And we have come up with 5 priorities for the Progressive Caucus that we want to make sure are added in. Things like a $15 minimum wage, things like making sure immigrants have access to all of the relief, and that we include a path to citizenship for essential workers.
Well, let's actually stay on that coronavirus relief plan. This morning, you and 50 other progressives, including Ilhan Omar and AOC, sent this letter to the White House asking for regular, reoccurring stimulus checks instead of a single $1,400 payout, as is proposed in the Biden coronavirus package. Now, is that something you want to see changed in the current proposal? Is this for later down the line? Can you tell us more about your thinking on reoccurring payments specifically?
Yeah, I mean, what we have said continuously is that families need money in their pockets that is a stable and secure, source of income, because they're not. So many people are still not working. They've been unemployed, 1 million people every week, and so whether those direct, recurring payments come in the form of survival checks or whether they come in other forms, there's a very good proposal on the table around the child tax credit and being able to, have a monthly per child check that goes to families as part of this. And so we're open to different ways of making sure this gets done, but we do feel that families should have recurring checks so that they've got some certainty and stability, and they don't have to worry about how they're going to put food on the table for the next month or pay their rent for the next month. We really, look, I mean, we just sent a letter about this very issue. 1.9 trillion needs to be the floor. We are willing to, really support bold relief. And I think that one of the things that Brian Deese from the administration said to me when I met with him a week or two ago was that, we should think about this in terms of the needs of people, not actually in terms of the dollar amounts. And that's where the 1.9 trillion came from. It came from looking and assessing, what do we need to really get relief to people, to get relief to businesses that are struggling, to get relief for vaccine distribution and testing and PPE, to local and state and tribal governments. Those are the things that we need to make sure are in there. And that price tag from their perspective came to 1.9 trillion. I think we could probably argue that economists have argued that we need between 3 and 4 trillion. And so we're continuing to work on that. But 1.9 trillion should be the floor, nothing less than that.
Congresswoman, as you can tell, I'm not Rachel Bay. She's having some technical difficulties. So she's going to head out of the platform and come back in, everyone. This is the beauty of doing live events in our current era. But we're going to continue with Congresswoman Jayapal. You introduced the Raise the Wage Act yesterday. It's a key priority of yours to increase the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. But given the Senate's 50-50 split, we're wondering how you think Democrats should go about trying to secure this priority. What should they be doing?
Thank you. Thank you, Eugene. This has been a priority for mine. As you may know, Seattle was the first major city in the country to pass a $15 minimum wage back in 2014. And I am proud to have served on that committee that helped draft the proposal that eventually passed the city council and signed by the mayor. So we have been at the forefront of this movement driven by fast food workers. We believe that this is absolutely something that should be a bipartisan priority, should be able to get 60 votes, because you think about Florida, 30 states have already raised the minimum wage. You think about Florida that went for the last president, but yet also passed a $15 minimum wage by a 2/3 majority of the supermajority of the voters. And so this is a Democratic and a Republican priority. But if Republicans refuse to do that, which it seems that, if the Republican Party has to decide if it's going to work for the people or if it's going to continue to just work for Donald Trump. But if they don't do it, then we should use budget reconciliation to pass a $15 minimum wage. The Republicans use budget reconciliation to pass a $2 trillion tax cut for the wealthiest Americans. And if they could do that, then Democrats can certainly use budget reconciliation to pass a minimum wage that would lift 32 million people up and put money back into economies and help poor and working folks across the country.
Yeah. Some progressives have talked about overruling the Senate parliamentarian if they try to stop this approach. Should Democrats consider that option, overruling the Senate parliamentarian? Rachel's back. There we go.
We're back. I'm sorry, I have video problems.
I think we just have to keep every tool in our toolbox, because let me just say this, this is not a normal time. We're trying to act like it's normal. President Biden is trying to bring us back to some form of function again, thank goodness. And thank you to the voters in Georgia, the Black women, the immigrant organizers in Arizona who helped us deliver the presidency to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But I am serving with a Republican caucus where 2/3 of the Republicans in the House voted to overturn the election, even after the insurrection. Many of my colleagues have still not admitted that Joe Biden won the presidency. We have, known QAnon conspiracy theorists serving with us. So I have only limited tolerance for a Republican Party that wrings its hands and, talks about unity and moving forward. We had an insurrection where their leader of their party incited that insurrection, and many of them continue to support him. The leader of the House is meeting with him today. So I am focused on the 400,000 lives that have already been lost to COVID, the 1 million jobs that are being lost every week, the businesses that are closing, and we need to stay laser focused on getting relief to people. If Republicans, a small handful of Republicans, enough Republicans want to come along with us, great. But this is the time to deliver bold relief to people so that we stop the suffering.
Let's talk about strategy for a little bit, Congresswoman Jayapal. Given Speaker Pelosi's sort of thin margin in the House, progressives could wield a lot of power this year. They sort of activate their own voting bloc, which you have talked about before, essentially banding together to ensure certain outcomes from leadership. I'm sort of curious where and on what policy items in particular you could see the CPC activate this voting bloc. Are there certain things you're pretty sure we might see that strategy come to fruition?
There's nothing in particular other than we are really committed to delivering relief. And as you know, we passed a reforms package last year that passed with 93% of our members voting for it, that allow us to take positions on key issues and then have a threshold for members to actually vote with us when we take a position as a caucus. But right now, what we've been doing is really engaging our members, and it's been amazing. Even on our top 5 priorities for the COVID relief package, we were able to, within 24 hours, get feedback from our members and come to a very unified perspective about what we want to see added. That's the focus on a $15 minimum wage being included, on immigration, relief being available to essential workers, and on all of the benefits. It's about increased funding for state, local, tribal, territorial governments. That was a key priority to add to this COVID relief package. So those are the kinds of things that we're able to weigh in early, able to get interaction from our membership, and then communicate those priorities to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And the White House. So that's our approach. Now, if what we've said to everyone is consult us early, let us tell you where we're going to have problems if you move forward down that path, so that we do that as a family. And we hopefully don't get to a place where we need to say, you know what, we just don't have the votes for it. The places where we're going to have the most leverage is on bills where there are going to be no Republicans or very few Republicans supporting. Because the more moderate a bill gets, let's say a Defense Authorization Act or something like that, where there are a lot of Republicans, it takes more votes on the Democratic side to stop that. And so we're going to be very thoughtful about how we leverage our power, but people should not mistake thoughtfulness and working alongside the Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, and the White House for any timidity in fighting for what people really need across this country. And we believe that, frankly, Joe Biden shares those goals. At least all of his recent moves have really shown us that he is committed to trying to deliver. And so we want to be the wind behind his sails in a successful presidency.
Since we only have a couple more minutes, just a very quick question on what you just mentioned. Those 5 improvements that you want to see to the COVID relief bill. Are those, do you have to have those in order to see progressive support? Are there certain ones that will have to be in this package in order for progressives to vote for this?
Well, some of them, we'll have to see what the entire package looks like. And there's a lot of negotiation that has to go on just about how this package is moving forward. Obviously, the Senate parliamentarian decides, and Eugene mentioned the possibility of overruling the Senate parliamentarian. But there are some of these things are reconciliation elements. And so we have to make sure we're making the case for that. So again, we don't have we are just trying to do everything we can to get the priorities in through the process. Similar, Rachel, to what we did with HR 1, HR 3, to make those bills much bolder so that we could have a unified caucus supporting those bills when they came to the floor. Now the stakes are much, much higher. So we will do everything we can all along the way with our leadership to signal where we are going to be. And so that's what you'll see, the 5 priorities coming out. One of them, by the way, is healthcare. We really believe that it is critical for everyone to have healthcare in the midst of a pandemic. So we are proposing auto enrollment into a public plan if anyone is unemployed, gets unemployed or uninsured. That would be a far more effective and cost-effective and necessary way to go about healthcare than some of the things that are being proposed right now.
On a related note about power and strategy, how do you sort of balance withholding votes to push leadership to the left without forcing them to turn to Republicans for a deal? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Senator Joe Manchin and sort of a veto threat he might wield in the Senate when it comes to Biden agenda. Are you at all concerned about, the moderates over there sort of upending progressive priorities? And how do you sort of balance both demanding what you want and what you need for priorities, but not sending leadership into the arms of negotiating with Republicans, I guess?
Well, that's why it's really important to think about what the bill is, because if the bill is something that can get Republican support, obviously the threat of it becoming more conservative is a real thing. But if it's, about expanding healthcare, whether it's through ACA subsidies or auto enrollment in a public plan, my guess is that there's not going to be many Republicans for that taking. So I think we have to be thoughtful about it. As I've said to our caucus, yes, progressives wield a lot of power, but so does any group of Democrats who, can get a certain number of votes. And it really depends on what the bill is. So I'm a very strategic person, and I think we have a very strategic executive board. Mandera Jones is one of our executive board members. And so we will continue to be thoughtful about how we use our power. And as I've said before, sometimes we will be right alongside our leadership and President Biden helping to get something done. Sometimes we will be out in front saying, this is what we need, and hopefully bringing people along, as progressives have done throughout the course of our history. $15 minimum wage was thought to be just a crazy idea 10 years ago. And today we have the entire Democratic caucus united around a $15 minimum wage and the need to raise the wage. So I always say progressives are just the first to the best and most just idea, and then everyone else has to catch up with us. Sometimes we will be behind, pushing, privately and publicly. So we have a lot of tools in our toolbox. We're going to use all of them.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal, for joining us and for rolling with my tech issues. It was great having you on this morning.
It was great to be on. And Eugene, I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you as well in the midst of those tech problems.
Two on one in a way that we didn't expect. Next, everyone, I'm going to interview newly elected Congressman Mandera Jones, a progressive Democrat from New York, right after this.
Can we get some quiet on the set, please?
These, I feel like a shrink with these.
And I'm trying not to talk, but it's hard.
What's the weirdest thing that has ever happened to you while reporting?
Oh, I can't say that.
I once walked into the male lawmaker's restroom off the House floor on accident.
And what'd you see in there?
Not a lot.
What's the one thing you're going to miss about Trump's tweets?
His tweets gave us this direct line into his brain in a way that we've never had with any politician.
And won't have again.
I don't think so. No. I mean, never say never.
That's true. Tell us something the public probably doesn't know about you.
Oh, I don't eat fruit. Oh my God, yes, I don't eat fruit. I've never eaten a strawberry in my life.
Wait, why?
Yeah, not even a banana.
Wait.
As a journalist, what scares you the most?
Getting something wrong. What will be different from this new team of 4 Playbook authors?
The great thing about this new team is that we all have very distinct lanes, not just Congress, not focused on one thing, and it's gonna be fun as hell.
It's gonna be awesome.
So fun.
Sign up for Politico Playbook, the unofficial guide to official Washington.
Hello, isn't that video fun? We're kind of a mess on that. We are back with Congressman Mandera Jones, a progressive Democrat from New York, to continue our conversation on how progressives are looking to shape and change the Democratic agenda and power in Washington and work with the Biden administration. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Eugene, thanks for having me. It's one of my favorite subjects, as you might imagine.
Yeah, I can't. Why? I wouldn't wonder why. We have a lot to get to, but I kind of want to start and acknowledge something that struck me as we were preparing, and your team said yes to this interview. An openly gay Black journalist interviewing an openly gay Black congressman is something I'm assuming, if it hasn't happened before, definitely hasn't happened at Politico. And so it made me think about how the historic nature of your win and what you represent influences your decision making.
It certainly hadn't happened before I was sworn in on January 3rd of this year. And the fact is that growing up poor, Black, and gay, I never imagined that someone like me could even run for Congress, let alone get elected. I spent most of my life afraid to tell people who I am because I was worried that my social circle would reject me, my family might not approve. But thankfully, because of the progress over the past several years, and just because of being surrounded by really good people, including in my family, that turned out not to be so big an issue after all. And I'm really grateful to be in a role that can help to change the way people imagine what is possible in this country. And I know from the messages that I get every single day from people all across this country that I'm doing, along with Richie Torres, precisely that. It also gives me a sense of urgency. People talk often about representation, and we know that there is power in representation. I'm proof of that. But it also gives me a lens through which I am able to interpret things that impact people in their daily lives. More recently, I was proud to be among the first members of Congress to call for the impeachment of this president. And I don't think it's any coincidence that me as an openly gay and Black person, having been just under siege by a mob of domestic terrorists who are white nationalists, that was particularly acute for me. I wasn't one of the folks who had concerns about unifying the country. I understood from the outset that if we didn't do something about that, about this former president who still needs to be barred from ever running from federal elected office, that we would find ourselves in this situation again, and that the ongoing assault on our democracy and on communities like the ones to which I belong would continue to be an issue.
You mentioned unity there. That's kind of been the thrust of Joe Biden's candidacy. And now, the 8 days, very short time, but the 8 days of his presidency. And I'm curious if you think factions within the Democratic Party are helpful to the actual mission with such a small majority, right? Like there has been conversations of, the quote unquote squad that, you've said you're not a member of any faction, right? And that you're going to work with, I think you said, people who are not members of the squad centrists, and even conservative Democrats and Republicans. So I'm curious if you think factions within the party are even helpful.
Well, in Congress, we call them caucuses, and I'm really proud to be a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, as well as the LGBTQ Equality Caucus, and so on and so forth. I'm really proud to be in a position where I'm able to forge great, close working relationships with my colleagues across the ideological spectrum within the Democratic Caucus, and even with some Republicans of good conscience. Specifically people who did not vote to overturn the free and fair election that occurred last November. I was pleased that I'd already been having good conversations with names that did not appear on that list of the 139 House Republicans. And so I think that the focus needs to be obviously pushing a bold agenda, a bold progressive agenda, one that is resonant with the American people writ large. If we don't deliver on those ideas that would actually address the overlapping, unprecedented crises that we face, then we will not be in the majority in 2022. So there's great urgency around that. But at the same time, we need to understand, especially with the slimness of this majority, how to be strategic, in the great words of the chair of the Progressive Caucus, when to fight, when to withhold support to improve a bill, and when to recognize that this is the best that can actually get to the House floor.
Yeah, on that last point, in the kind of like block voting and withholding votes in Congress, I'm curious what topics, what things you would try to lead on to tell people, we should hold this vote. We should wait and let them make this better for the agenda that we're trying to push. Like, what are the things that you would be willing to do that on?
Well, you may know that I'm one of the leading champions of a bill known as H.R. 1, or the For the People Act. Democracy reforms are literally existential to the future of this civilization that we live in. I want to remind people that January 6th began as a myth, a big lie, as we've been saying, about voter fraud, about the election in November somehow being stolen from Donald Trump without evidence of mass voter fraud by the same people who voted to overturn that election. And that is because they are laying a foundation for another decade of voter suppression, like what we saw following the election of Barack Obama in 2008. And so H.R. 1 contains a set of critical democracy reforms to save our democracy, to ensure that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and other QAnon conspiracy theorists who currently serve in the United States Congress are unable to prevail in general election contests. So that gets to ending partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts and replacing that process with independent redistricting commissions. It's also automatic voter registration to enfranchise an additional 50 million people nationally. And of course, public financing of congressional elections so that people who get to Congress don't have the nerve or the misunderstanding to debate the need for $2,000 survival checks in the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. This is existential stuff. I want the Biden administration to prioritize it. I'm grateful to Chuck Schumer for making it Senate Bill number 1, and I'm going to continue to lead on this issue because we can still have a democracy in this country, but we've got to fight for it, and we've got to enact H.R. 1.
Yeah, you talked about Congresswoman Taylor Greene and Boebert. Do you think that there have been calls to both censure and expel them, especially the former? Do you think that should happen? Are you in support of censuring or expelling them and the other members of the Republican Party who voted to invalidate those results?
Well, I'm not going to weigh in on what should happen to specific individuals with respect to consequences for January 6th, especially having been appointed to the House Ethics Committee just 2 days ago. These matters may actually come before me in the near future. But I will say that anyone who played a role in the incitement of the January 6th attempted coup, the violent, deadly insurrection, should be held accountable in myriad ways from my perspective. And so I'm really proud to have co-sponsored Congresswoman Cori Bush's legislation that would investigate and expel those members who played a role in that insurrection. And I'm looking forward to that investigation being underway.
Yeah. Do you think that, there have been calls for quote unquote unity that's come from President Biden, and that is also something that Republicans have talked about, that impeachment isn't a part of unity, trying to expel members of the Republican Party or censure them is not part of unity. I guess I'm curious how you view unity and how you balance unity versus what you think is making that someone is held responsible for their actions. Like what's more important in trying to get things done for this country?
I think what's most important is operating in good faith. And the arguments to distract from accountability on some unfounded, disingenuous theory of unity should not be taken very seriously from the same people who nearly got us killed before calling for unity just hours later, even after they continued to push the big lie and to overturn the free and fair election that occurred in November. So I think as in any healthy relationship, there must be accountability in healing before you move forward in unity. And I know that's what the American people want. It's certainly what my constituents want, who are outraged across the political spectrum. Republicans and Democrats have told me, you've got to hold these people accountable. Otherwise, it will happen again. We are the laughingstock of the world unfortunately, based on the thus far inadequate response due to Republicans in the House and the Senate to January 6th and the utter lack of accountability. And so we have to be sure and to be steady and to be clear in terms of there being no tolerance for the events of January 6th.
I'm curious about kind of the bipartisan approach that President Biden really wants, is really going to focus on, because you're hearing from, progressives, especially, activists who are saying, no, we have the power, do what we want done. So I guess, do you have concerns about that bipartisanship? Like trying to get deals done with Republicans when, for the first time in a while, Democrats have a chance to actually do what they've been promising since President Trump was elected and get some of these big things done?
I may be 33 years old, but I'm still old enough to remember when Barack Obama went out of his way to get Republicans at the table to try to get bipartisan support to pass the ACA. Which is enormously popular, as you know, today with the American people, and in fact was a big reason why we took back the House in 2018. And he was rebuffed at every turn, no matter how willing he was to compromise with these people. When people nearly got you killed and don't even take accountability, and many of them don't even acknowledge that Joe Biden is the rightful president of the United States based on that election in November, it's really difficult to take them seriously when they talk about bipartisanship. And I'm hopeful that President Biden, who was part of the same administration that I was when I worked at the Justice Department in 2009 and 2010, will remember those lessons and will take heed and will move forward, not just with blessing the reconciliation process, which we will do as a United States Congress, but also pushing for filibuster repeal and prevailing upon Joe Manchin to meet the moment, because if we don't meet this moment, again, we will not have a Democratic Senate majority or a Democratic controlled House of Representatives or a Democrat in the White House, I believe, in 4 years, if we don't deliver for the American people and show them that there's a real difference when Democrats have control, unified control of government versus when Republicans have control.
I guess, I kind of want to get you drill down a little bit on this. Do you think that President Joe Biden, you and the Democrats in Congress should focus on getting things done that the people that voted for you want versus trying to make deals? I guess, is it more important to get this bipartisanship and try to get things that work for both parties, or have 2 years of unified control? And we know what happens in the first in the midterms for a sitting president. It will, it's likely to flip if history is our guide. So, is it more important to just drill down and do exactly what these big things that you guys said, and bipartisanship to the wayside?
Well, to be clear, the party of Donald Trump is not trying to help the American people writ large in the way that Democrats are. And so we have to move forward with what Democrats are able to get done. And hopefully Republicans of good conscience will come along the way. But we should not be stopping or even modifying our agenda legislatively to enact policies that are broadly popular with the American people, whether it is saving our democracy, saving the planet from climate catastrophe, even as most of the Republicans in Congress deny climate science, expanding healthcare coverage. Of course, I'm a supporter of single-payer Medicare for all, which also enjoys majority support in the midst of a once-in-a-century pandemic, by the way. And so we have to push forward on these bold items. Obviously, COVID-19 relief, including money for states and local municipalities that have just been ravaged by the COVID-19 crisis, and getting more vaccines to states like New York, where I represent, who are really struggling and want to reopen this economy just like everyone else, but who have been punished unfairly by the former president of the United States.
Over the last 4 years, there has been such a rise on the activist side of things on the left, right? There's more climate activists, more anti-racist activists, more land rights activists than ever before. I'm curious if you think all of those powerful big groups asking for the president, for Congress to get things done, does it make your job more difficult, and how so? Because it making all those groups happy isn't going to happen, right? And so how are you and the progressives going to balance that in Congress, and how are you going to push Joe Biden to balance and prioritize that in his position?
Well, some groups you don't want to make happy, right? If it's the Heritage Foundation, go somewhere else.
But the groups on the left, right? The climate activists, you have the anti-activist land rights, like all of those groups on the left are really powerful, and they're demanding a lot of huge change in this country.
And the Sunrise Movement has given accolades to Joe Biden for having proposed the most ambitious climate policies of any president in the United States history. We have seen this presidential administration move to the left, first as a candidate and now as a president, on myriad issues that, again, are popularly supported by the American people and have been pushed by organizations like the Sunrise Movement. And so I think their advocacy continues to have great importance. I think they've been enormously effective. I say this as a former activist myself. And as Congressman Jayapal said, Joe Biden did not start at this place. It took advocacy from outside organizations and seeing the kind of broad support that these policies have from the American people to get him to this place. I welcome him to this place, and I'm grateful to work with him in partnership to meet this moment of overlapping crises.
My producer wants me to move on, but I do have one more question for you. We got this from a viewer, and I think it's a really key question for every member of Congress. But since you're here, something is better than nothing, right? Something is better than nothing, even if it's less than one wanted. That's a saying that they have in there. For example, half a loaf of bread is better than having no bread. So I guess for you, what are a full loaf or nothing issues? What are the things that you are saying, no, I want this, or nothing at all?
Well, I think it is going to be context specific. If we don't meet the moment and go big in the area of climate, not just legislatively, but by executive action, as people try to figure out whether it's urgent to repeal the filibuster, which it is obviously. This president should continue to use executive action to undo the damage of the past 4 years and then to go further, because he says he's going to build back better, which to me is an acknowledgement of what I've been saying for a long time now, including as a candidate, which is that this moment is our generation's reconstruction. We have to get reconstruction right this time around. We didn't get it right in the prior occasions throughout American history. So I'm not going to prejudge a particular issue. I want the context to appear before me. But as Pramila Jayapal said, there must be a strategy with respect to when to withhold votes and when to recognize that this is the best thing that can actually get a vote on the House floor. And I know that's a conversation that precedes even what happens in the United States Senate, where you've got a different cast of characters.
Thank you, Congressman Jones, for joining us. I know you're very busy. You have a lot going on. It was so good having you, and we hope to have you again soon. Likewise. And the historic implications of this interview are not lost on me. Thank you for raising that. Thank you so much. Have a good one. For those that are watching, obviously Playbook is here to give you all the good stuff. Tomorrow, our colleague Tara Palmieri, she's already there. She's in Wyoming, where Representative Matt Gaetz is set to go. Rachel, how would you put it? Mess with Liz Cheney, troll Liz Cheney live. So she is there. So some of that is going to come to you tomorrow on Playbook. So keep a lookout.
Yeah, if you're not a subscriber yet, you can subscribe to Playbook by visiting politico.com/Playbook. And you can follow upcoming Politico Live programming on our social media @Politico Live.